Hello everyone, today I'm going to continue telling you the story of the single mother, Diệu. That morning, after a night haunted by disturbing memories, Han woke with her body aching but her mind a little lighter. The early breeze drifted through the trees in the yard, carrying the familiar scent of damp earth, heralding the approach of the rainy season. She stood quietly for a moment on the porch, breathing in the fragrance of the land she knew so well, then decided to busy herself with small chores to ease her thoughts. With her familiar pair of scissors in hand, Han carefully trimmed the overgrown shrubs in front of the house. Each branch and leaf was neatly gathered. She planned to dry them and burn them later to keep mosquitoes from breeding during the long rains. When the yard work was done, she stepped back inside. Little Tom was sitting quietly on the porch, his small hands shaping dry clay, a few old toys scattered beside him. He had grown so much, now able to play by himself so his mother could work in peace. Han bent down to wrap him in her arms, burying her face in his hair, still warm and scented with sunlight. In that moment, a deep sense of gratitude welled up inside her, that despite everything Tom was safe. But the warmth quickly faded, replaced by a quiet unease when she thought of An, who had not returned since early morning. Forcing herself to focus, she walked into the kitchen, took a basket of ripe red tomatoes, a bundle of fresh greens, and a small portion of meat she had saved from the day before. Han cracked several eggs, mixing them with finely chopped scallions and a pinch of salt. On the stove, the cast iron pan was already searing hot, ready for a proper lunch. She crouched to tend the fire, stacking the dry logs she had prepared days earlier into neat layers, kindling them with a few brittle leaves. Smoke rose in soft wisps, curling into the pale, fragile light of the morning. Wisps of smoke curled into the pale morning light, slipping through the gaps in the window frames, painting a fragile picture of peace. Han was placing the freshly washed vegetables into a basket, her hands still carrying the scent of crisp leaves, when a sudden voice called from outside the gate. It was deep, clear, and carried across the stillness of the yard. She stepped out to look and immediately recognized Mr. Tin, the commune officer, accompanied by a police officer in a neat uniform. Han's heart tightened, a nameless worry flooding her chest. Quickly rinsing her hands, she opened the gate and politely invited them in. "Today I've come to ask for a few more details about the incident the other day. We need to verify some information," Mr. Tin said, his tone serious but still gentle. Han hurried to pour them tea, then sat down and recounted everything in detail. She left nothing out from the moment two strangers broke in, restrained her and rummaged through her belongings, to the moment a mysterious man appeared just in time to save her. More than anything, she hoped the police could soon find a lead to protect her son and their little home. After listening in silence for a while, Mr. Tin spoke slowly. "You once asked me about someone named Diệu, also called Hoa, didn't you? I've checked. In the neighboring village there used to be someone by that name, but their family was deep in debt, and they vanished without a trace long ago. No one knows where they are now." The news sent a ripple of unease through Han. Could An, the gentle, trustworthy friend she had always believed in, actually be Diệu? Could she have once lived here, hiding a past Han never knew about? Or was it all just coincidence? Mr. Tin's voice suddenly grew more stern. "To be honest, I have some doubts about your housemate. Since she arrived, your home has had one misfortune after another. We don't have proof yet, but the possibility of her involvement still needs to be considered." Han froze for a moment, but quickly steadied herself. "An isn't that kind of person, Uncle. She's very respectable. If she wanted to do anything, she wouldn't need to make it this complicated. Just wait until I wasn't home. I don't even hide any money here." Mr. Tin nodded, his voice softening. "I understand, but prevention is better than cure. We'll assign more patrols around your home to make sure nothing bad happens again. If there's any emergency, just call me." After exchanging a few more words, the two officers got up to leave. Han walked them to the gate, watching as the motorbike disappeared beyond the bamboo grove. The morning breeze blew once more, but instead of peace, it carried waves of unsettled thoughts in her heart. She didn't know whether to trust her instincts and her faith in Han, or to start guarding herself against everyone. Another day had begun, but Han's heart remained far from calm. On his way back, Mr. Tin unexpectedly ran into Tan at a bend near the entrance of the village. After a brief exchange of greetings, he told Tan about the break-in at Han's house the previous night. Tan stopped short, his brows knitting in surprise. He hadn't heard a word about it before. The news seemed to jolt him, and his normally steady demeanor shifted into urgency. Mr. Tin took the opportunity to remind him to stay alert, explaining that lately there had been a number of unfamiliar faces wandering around the area. If he saw or heard anything unusual, he was to report it right away so they could act quickly. Without a moment's hesitation, Tan spun his motorbike around and headed straight for Han's house, the engine growling as he pushed it harder along the dirt track. Pulling into her yard, he was already calling out before his feet hit the ground. Stepping quickly into the doorway, his voice was tight with worry. "Han, are you all right? Were you hurt anywhere?" Han looked up from the kitchen, startled at first, then offered a small, calm smile. "I'm fine. It's all over now." But Tana's expression remained tense. He glanced around the room as if to check for any sign of danger, then lowered his voice, still laced with concern. He insisted on taking her and little Tom to stay at his house for a while, convinced it wasn't safe for them to remain here alone. The way he spoke, firm yet filled with warmth, left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. It was written all over his face, in the way his eyes softened when they rested on her, in the furrow that wouldn't leave his brow. Han tried to reassure him, repeating that she was fine, until at last his shoulders eased and his breathing steadied. She offered gently, "Why don't you play with Tom for a while? I'll finish cooking lunch." From the kitchen, the rich aroma of simmering food began to drift through the house, wrapping the space in a sense of comfort. In the next room, the sound of Tana's laughter mingled with Tom's gleeful shouts as they chased a small wooden toy across the floor. Every so often, Han would glance through the doorway, catching sight of the two together. Her lips curved into a smile, soft, almost wistful, as an unspoken wish bloomed quietly in her heart, that Tom could grow up in a complete home, with both a mother and a father, embraced in unwavering love. When the meal was finally ready, the table stood set, steam curling gently from the dishes. But Han had yet to return, so the three of them stayed in the living room a little longer, playing with Tom, their laughter filling the air. They decided they would wait for her to come back before sitting down to eat, the afternoon sunlight spilling in through the open windows, bathing the scene in a warm, fleeting peace. While at Han's house, Tan and little Tom were still happily playing together, waiting for Han to return. Meanwhile, on a small road not far away, Dan was slowly walking down the slope toward the market. The sun was dry and bright, the wind rustled through the bamboo, but his eyes suddenly darkened when he spotted a familiar figure, Vi. Vi was skulking along the edge of the road, glancing around nervously as if afraid of being seen. Dan instantly recognized him as the troublemaker who had caused no small amount of chaos in the area. Without hesitation, Dan strode straight over and blocked his path. "Vi, what kind of trouble are you stirring up this time?" Dan said coldly. At the sound of his voice, Vi flinched, his face turning pale. He stammered out a few weak excuses, but the unease in his eyes betrayed him completely. Dan, being sharp-eyed, could tell at once that something shady was going on. He pressed further, his tone growing more forceful with each question. Finally, under the pressure of Dan's piercing gaze, Vi confessed. The two thieves from the other night were hired by him, and they had taken On away. Hearing this, Dan's blood boiled. He immediately ordered Vi to lead him to the place. But before going, Dan changed his mind. He would first take Vi to Han's house so Ton could hear the truth. When they reached the gate, Vi froze. He remembered the beating Ton had given him last time and began to tremble, refusing to go in. The noise outside caught Tana's attention, and he stepped out to see what was going on. One glance at Vi's face, and Ton knew something was wrong. Dan didn't waste words. This is the one who ordered the kidnapping of An. At that, Ton almost lunged at him on the spot. He strode forward, grabbed Vi by the collar, and glared with eyes burning with fury. Vi panicked, pleading desperately. I didn't really want it to go that far. At first, I only wanted to play the hero and save the damsel, so I hired those two to stage trouble. But I didn't expect them to betray me, knock me out, and take On away. Until now, I still don't know where she is. His confession made the air in front of Han's house turn heavy and tense. Tana's fists clenched, his whole body taut, while Dan and Han exchanged a weighted look, knowing that now the situation had become far more serious than before. The situation had now escalated to a point where there was no turning back. Tana's anger was boiling over, so much so that he looked ready to lunge at Vi and beat him senseless right there in the yard. His grip on Vi's shirt tightened with every question, his voice sharp and relentless as he demanded every scrap of information the man could possibly know. Vi squirmed, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting away, but Ton wasn't going to let him slip away without answers. After a tense few minutes of interrogation, Vi finally spat out what he knew. Convinced that the man had no more secrets to hide, Ton turned to Dan and ordered him to take Vi straight to the police. Their voices had grown loud enough to carry into the house, the sound of sharp words and heavy breathing cutting through the steady drumming of rain on the roof. From inside, Han stepped into the doorway, wiping her damp hands on her apron, her brow furrowed. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes moving from Tana's rigid shoulders to Vi's uneasy stance. Ton caught her gaze and immediately tried to mask the tension in his voice, waving off her concern with a quick, "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." But the worry in her gut tightened. Something about the scene, about Vi's shifty eyes, the set of Tana's jaw, told her that this was no small matter. And the fact that On still hadn't returned only made the dread worse. Vi, sensing an opportunity, leaned slightly toward Ton, muttering something in a low, urgent tone, an attempt to bargain his way out. Just then Phi, a neighbor who happened to be walking past, spotted the scene. Without hesitation, he strode over, barked at Vi, and gave him a hard shove. Vi staggered back, then suddenly bolted, splashing through the mud. Ton reacted instantly, breaking into a sprint after him, mud spraying up the back of his legs as the rain pounded harder. They chased each other down the slippery lane until both came to an abrupt stop, panting in the cold air. Dan, having run to catch up, grabbed Tana's arm and pulled him aside. "Vi can wait," Dan said firmly over the rain. "We have to find On first, she's in real danger." By now the rain was coming down in heavy sheets, turning the dirt paths into shallow streams of brown water. No one knew where On was, but Tana's mind flashed to a memory. The abandoned house Vi had once used to lock someone up. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead they had. Back at the house, Han's unease had reached its peak. She cornered Dan as soon as he stepped back in, her voice tight. "Tell me what's going on." Dan hesitated, then gave a small nod toward Ton. It was time to tell her the truth. Tana's face was unreadable as he stepped closer, his tone low but steady. "Promise me you'll stay calm. On has been kidnapped." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. Han stood frozen for a moment, her mind reeling. She had just seen On the day before. How could this be happening? Her heartbeat quickened, panic rising, her throat tight. Ton and Dan exchanged a glance, both worried she might lose her composure. They urged her to stay home with Tom where it was safe, but she shook her head, her voice breaking with determination. "No, I'm going with you. I can't just stay here." They argued back and forth, but in the end Ton gave in on one condition. Tom would have to be left at Mrs. Men's house for safety. Han didn't hesitate. She hurried inside, grabbing a few things with trembling hands. In her rush, she woke Tom from his deep sleep, scooping the drowsy child into her arms. He whimpered softly, not understanding why his mother was moving so quickly through the dimly lit room. In the chaos, she forgot to close the front door. Minutes later, with Tom safely in Mrs. Men's care, the three of them mounted their motorbikes. The road ahead was nothing but mud and water, the tires slipping and spinning as they tried to climb the hill toward the far side of the ridge. Rain lashed at their faces, soaking them to the bone, but none of them slowed down. The abandoned house was out there, hidden in the curtain of rain and mist, and it might be the only place left to find on. Through the blinding curtain of rain and the treacherous mud-slick road, the three pressed on, the roar of the motorbikes blending with the hiss of wind through the trees. When they reached the fork, the very spot where Han had parted ways with on the day before, Ton raised his hand in signal, leading them down a narrow, shadowed path flanked by old bamboo groves swaying in the wind. Sheets of rain turned the ground to sludge, each step sinking deep into the thick mud, but no one slowed. The tension was so heavy that all they could hear was their own quickened breathing and the wet squelch of their boots in the mire. After a short distance, Han suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Her gaze was drawn to a dark patch beneath a clump of bamboo by the roadside. Her heart sank as she recognized Anna's familiar woven basket lying abandoned on the wet ground, beside a conical hat soaked through and misshapen from the pounding rain. Shivering, she stepped forward, bent down and picked them up, her hands numb and dripping. Just the touch of these belongings sent a wave of fear crashing over her, tightening in her chest. Tears welled and spilled down her cheeks, mingling with the cold rain. Ton and Dan rushed over at once. Ton gently but firmly took the basket from her, his voice calm but urgent. "Han, steady yourself. Every minute counts now. We have to keep looking for An." Han nodded, forcing down the lump in her throat and swallowing her tears, then moved on, each step heavier under the relentless drumming of the rain. The path toward the abandoned house narrowed further, overgrown with weeds that brushed at their legs, ankle-deep puddles flooding the way. The motorbikes could go no farther. They left them at the edge of the forest. From there they went on foot, weaving through winding trails, turning left and right, scanning for any faint trace matching Vi's description. The cold rain seeped into their skin, leaving Han's fingers stiff and aching, and even Ton and Dan's breathing grew labored. After what felt like an endless trek, the shadowy shape of the abandoned house emerged from the tangle of overgrown trees. Its corrugated roof was rusted and sagging, the dark, empty windows staring out like hollow eyes. The silence around it was so complete that only the steady patter of rain on the metal roof could be heard. The three approached in silence. Ton led, moving cautiously, his eyes darting to every corner. Suddenly he stooped, picking up a cigarette but lying on the damp ground. Lifting it to his nose, he inhaled faintly, then gave a short, certain nod. "This is it, they've been here." At his words, a shiver ran through Han. The place was utterly desolate, with no other houses for miles. If anything happened here, no one would hear. They split up to search, combing through each room, then circling around the back. All they found were a few rain-soaked lengths of rope scattered on the floor, clear evidence that An had been tied here. Ton and Dan exchanged a grim look. The two men had already taken her elsewhere. Outside, the rain poured in heavy sheets, wind bending the trees at their trunks. Ton turned to Han, his tone firm yet gentle. "Go back for now. Tom's been at Mrs. Men's since this afternoon. He's waiting. Dan and I will keep searching." Han bit her lip hard, torn in two. She knew Ton was right, yet the image of An being led away from this place kept her rooted to the spot, restless and unwilling to leave. Looking up at him, her worry was plain. "And you? This place is dangerous." Ton offered a reassuring smile, But through the rain, Han could still see the alertness and resolve burning in his eyes, a determination not to give up, no matter how many muddy, shadowed roads he had to walk, no matter how long he had to search in the thick veil of rain. The rain had eased slightly as Dan drove Han and little Tom away from the abandoned house. The forest path was slick and treacherous, the motorbike tires sliding through muddy puddles, spraying dirt up onto their trouser legs. All the way back, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the patter of rain on the leaves overhead and the steady hum of the engine. But inside, especially for Han, worry for Tom gnawed at her like a heavy stone pressing on her chest. He was still out there alone in that desolate, cold place. She had no idea what he was doing now, whether he'd found any trace of On, and most importantly, whether he was safe. She turned to glance at the misty road behind them, where Tana's figure had disappeared, and her heart tightened with each beat. Raindrops clinging to her hair slid down her cheeks, mixing with the salt of tears she hadn't wiped away. Han felt both anxious and guilty, blaming herself for not staying with him. I should have gone with him, at least I could have helped, she thought. But the image of the dense forest under the pounding rain, the pitch-dark dirt road, and the cold wind howling through the trees filled her with dread. Dan stole a glance at her, noticing her hands gripping the edge of her shirt, her lips pressed into a thin line. He spoke quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Calm down. Right now there's nothing we can do but wait for news from Tan and inform the police." Han nodded, but the unease didn't leave her. Her mind was tangled with thoughts. Worry for On, whose fate was still unknown. Worry for Tan, who was facing danger alone. And a vague, looming fear that something even worse might happen. On Han's lap, little Tom played innocently with his mother's fingers, occasionally giggling. The child had no idea what was going on, only wondering why his mother was so quiet and sad today. When he looked up and saw her crying, his big round eyes blinked in confusion. His small hand reached up to touch her cheek as if to ask why. Meanwhile, back at the abandoned house, Tan was still searching persistently. The downpour had flooded the narrow paths leading deeper into the forest, making every step difficult. He tried to follow any sign or trail, but the rain had washed everything away. Dan tried calling him but only got the automated message. "The subscriber cannot be reached." He hesitated, staring into the dark, then turned back toward Han and Tom. Leaving them alone right now felt too risky, so he didn't dare return to the search. Time crawled by, suffocatingly slow. Back at the house, Han sat on the porch, her eyes fixed on the pitch-black road, yearning for a familiar silhouette to appear. She tried calling Tan, but again there was no connection. They decided to wait a little longer, though inside Han felt like her heart was burning. It wasn't until late at night, when the only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the wind slipping through the eaves, that Tan finally returned quietly. Dan was still sitting on the porch steps waiting, while Han had dozed off at some point, her head resting on a chair, her face marked with dried raindrops. Tan paused for a moment, his eyes softening, before stepping in to speak with Dan. They talked for a long time, agreeing that they would go to the police first thing in the morning and then plan their next move. When Dan was about to leave, Tan hesitated. He glanced into the house, where Han and Tom slept, and thought about leaving the two of them alone here tonight. The unease tightened in his chest, and he decided to stay. Dan agreed, spreading a mat out on the porch to sleep, while Tan sat leaning against a post, eyes fixed on the dark road outside, silently keeping watch through the night, ready to act if anything out of the ordinary happened.
Xin chào mọi người, lại là mình đây. Ở tập video vừa rồi, khi nghe tin Ánh bị bắt cóc, Hân hoảng loạn cùng Thành và Danh đi vào rừng sâu để tìm tung tích Ánh, nhưng đến căn nhà hoang mà nơi Ánh đã bị nhốt vẫn không thấy cô đâu. Liệu rằng Thành, Danh và Hân có tìm được Ánh hay không? Mời mọi người đón xem ở video tiếp theo nha. Ở video tiếp theo thì sẽ hé lộ những tình tiết mới hay và hấp dẫn trong quá trình giải cứu Ánh khỏi tay bọn bắt cóc. Để không bỏ lỡ video mới nhất, mọi người nhớ like, share, bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới. Mọi người để lại nhận xét ở dưới bình luận giúp mình nha. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video của mình. Rất mong được mọi người ủng hộ kênh của mình để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hay và hấp dẫn hơn. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại mọi người.